All right, so today we're going to be going over backcountry skiing focused weather resources. And I've got Miles here, and he will go ahead and give himself a proper introduction. But we went to school together, and I wanted to take a little bit of time, talk with you about the weather resources that I've accumulated with backcountry partners and through education, and just kind of assess the stock in those, and then also get additional resources from a forecaster yourself, and then we can use that information and distribute that and hopefully keep ourselves safe. So, Miles, give us your introduction.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm Miles. As Nick said, we went to school together at Brockport. After that, I went to St. Louis University, where I collected my master's degree. And now I'm in the National Weather Service on the West Coast in Medford, Oregon. Currently working Weather Service. NOAA is our kind of parent agency. Um, and I do a little bit of everything: winter weather forecasting, aviation, marine, fire weather. So I know it all, including some of the avalanche stuff, or at least stuff to be aware of. Taking a course myself and avid skier too. So I'm excited to be here and be talking about this.
Awesome. Yeah. I didn't know you ended up taking an Avi course.
Yeah, I did it uh, 2 years ago. I took one before I went backcountry skiing with one of my coworkers on Mount Shasta out here.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a level one or was it like an awareness course?
It was more just the awareness course. In fact,
Okay.
we taught the weather part of it and, like, gave a climate outlook, or not climate, but, like, winter weather season outlook.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Awesome. And do you have a beacon and all that stuff when you go out in the backcountry?
I haven't gone since then. I just took the course and borrowed the gear. It's kinda,
Gotcha.
like, on the wish list, but that stuff is expensive, so
Yeah, yeah.
budget doesn't always allow.
Well, that's cool. I didn't know you actually took like avalanche education because that's yeah, it was really interesting with like a weather background because it's a very it's weird because like avalanche forecasting is so new that it's like not that scientific yet, but at the same time there's a handful of guys like yourself who are into backcountry skiing and are that understand weather that are making it scientific. So, it's really interesting like hearing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I like it too. It reminds me a lot of fire weather forecasting in the sense of, like, weather is a part of it, and yet there's also the terrain aspects, and there's a few other things that go into it that aren't specifically weather. Like, I'm kinda thinking of it too as, like, the slabs formation and stuff like that. Like, weather affects it, but knowing how to interpret it and, like, work around it, like, it does get into a different realm of expertise. So that's what's fun to learn about it, because you're growing skills on top of what you and I kind of know already. All right. So what we're looking at here is the front page to the National Weather Service, can be found at weather.gov. And in this case, we're going to go out east since there's actually some active weather going on. And we're going to go to the Burlington, Vermont office. And we're going to start off with the avalanche guidance that a lot of offices are starting to put out. It is a new product, so any feedback you can give to the offices, like as you use it, would be great. But basically, we're pulling up points of interest for known backcountry skiing locations. So in this case, let's look at Smuggler's Notch. And when I select that, in Burlington, Vermont's case, below it pops up a forecast. And each office is going to test out something a little different as we get to know, sort of the end users and stuff. But it packages our forecast, the National Weather Service, into something palatable for the end user. And it puts it into near term and the extended. And then it also puts it into tabular. A lot of offices are pulling in what a local avalanche center is putting out for, like, risk level for avalanche danger.
That would be like your low, moderate, and considerable.
Right, exactly.
Or
And then
higher.
we're also reviewing some of the current conditions, which, on top of finding it, like, in the avalanche guidance, each office is also going to make it available at the bottom of their forecast page, which you'll have to excuse me, I don't frequent Burlington's office too much. So under the current conditions, you're going to want to go to the observations and a map. And as it loads, it'll take you to here. And so this is just an overview. Um, Again, each office, it's going to look slightly different, but the base is going to be there. So the colors in the background are the watches and warnings. And then you can see points with weather information on there. And so that's just pulling up what the current conditions are. So if you're already, on the mountain, you can figure out what's going on at the nearest point. And so that's how you find it. And then the last part of our forecast that people should be aware of is under every office's winter weather page, you're going to have a link to the winter storm and winter severity index, the WSSI. And I highly recommend looking at this because it takes the numerical values of a forecast, so like 8 inches of snowfall and 30-mile-an-hour winds, as an example, and gives it context. Maybe not necessarily for avalanche, but at least when you're driving there, and a few things that you can intuit um, some avalanche stuff. So it takes you to here. It's a map of the whole CONUS. You can zoom in and out as much as you want. And there's some different winter related impacts. So, like, are you having an impact because of the raw amount of snow? Or more relevant to maybe an avalanche user would be blowing snow. And so we click on it here. We go to day 3, like, okay, there's some winter weather coming in. But that bluish grayish color is just winter weather expected. It's not an impact. So you're not forming the cornices. You're not kind of blowing snow into a loose pile that could let loose.
So it would show like red, like major impact. You can see over like Maine, it's showing like major impact for a certain area. So I'll kind of pause and say blowing snow is obviously like an indicator of, let's say slab avalanches. And if you look in other resources and you see like wind speed, like, persistent wind coming from the west, you would presume that like an east aspect would have a lot of snow deposited. I'd also add too, um, I kind of wish we had like one of my friends who teaches Abby courses on here, but that's okay. Maybe next year we can circle back. But I would say too, like things like flash freeze. I'm not sure. Does that refer to like freezing rain, or is that like just really like
It
dropping
does
temperatures?
give definition. So under the click me for additional information, it'll tell you like description, product, and the user's guide. And I believe the flash freeze definition is actually for like rain or like melted snow. Uh, yeah, temperatures starting above freezing and then quickly falling below freezing during precipitation events. So that's like uh, rain falling, cold front moves through, and behind that it freezes. So maybe it's more like fall relevant.
Hmm.
But certainly, if it's an ice storm, like it could be useful.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. Because I was thinking, that's obviously that could be important for like, if it was like freezing rain or something, it's going to create like a crust in the snowpack, and crusts are obviously relevant because that could lead to, you know, difference in stability in the snowpack from the base to the top, which ultimately is what ends up causing avalanches. So
For sure. And let's not forget, like, you want to get to the mountain safely in the first place. So if you can't drive on the road safely, you can't go skiing. So this will help you also, keep track of whether or not it's safe to drive.
hmm, cool. Nice. So this is like a good tool to summarize everything, all the models and everything that you may be looking at, but maybe necessarily like don't necessarily have the experience to put together into a tangible like impact.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, this is the what I'll call a refined product. It is QC'd by National Weather Service employees. This is a forecast. It's not raw model data. But what I will show you, if you want to get into some of the nitty gritty and see what we're looking at to put into it, uh, I can cover some sources for that guidance. Um,
Okay. Yeah, like public facing sources. If this if this is sort of the end of like this, I like this tool. I think this is very helpful. Um, we obviously discussed before we jumped on here. I use Tropical Tidbits. That's something that is publicly accessible.
yep,
And we
I
kind
use
of looked
College of
at
DuPage, so there's different
perfect.
sources.
Yeah.
And so I'll show the College of DuPage's website, weather.cod.edu, in that case, /forecast. And it has the same information that Nick's favorite tropical tidbits has. So since this is Nick's show here, we'll kind of cover the tropical tidbits side of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So either way, earlier I had kind of asked you. I remember there being the GFS, and I remember there being the NAM, and I didn't really know the differences between them and what they're used for, and then also kind of like how to like really interface with that. So
Yeah, so when Nick and I got out of college, like it was the focus was on what we call deterministic models. So the acronym's name is the GFS and the NAM. And since I left even grad school and gotten into the weather service, it's changed. We're now talking deterministics and ensemble data, which ensembles is taking multiple models, meshing them together, and getting a unified result out of it. So while the individual models can give you detail, the ensembles can give you confidence and sometimes some added range. So we're going to start with the ensembles, and there's a few different types. There's the EPS, that's the European Prediction System, and then there's the GEFS, that's the GFS, Global Forecast System. It's sort of the American um, group's model. There is also a Canadian, which is not available on Tropical Tidbits, but it is an ensemble that's out there. And so what you're going to get, um, in our case, if I jump back to the Northeast again, oh, so okay, the European doesn't have the Northeast and the ensemble. So what I want to get at is a little more detail on what an ensemble is. In the Europeans case, I believe it's 50 model members. It could be 51, and the GFS is 30 or 32. And they're all basically the same. There's same grid resolution. It's the same model. The only thing that's different is they take the observations and they change them very, very minutely because our equations aren't perfect and those tiny errors compound over time, and they give you a potential representation of what could happen as things change going forward. Like the differences are actually useful. And we've seen cases where, um, you know, the model run that doesn't have the perfect exact observations that we observed put in be right. And so it's useful to look at a large scale picture, and you can access things from the ensembles like daily precip, total accumulated. You can look at some things like just the pressure. 850 millibars is sort of like a peak height. Like if you're near sea level, it could be around 3,000, 3,500 feet. So if you're looking for sort of like a peak or ridge level wind, like that could be useful. And this goes out in time. These are good for like the days 4 through 8 time frame, the ensembles are. And you wanna look at both of them. You wanna look at the EPS, you wanna look at the GEFS, and you wanna see how closely they match up. The more they match up, the more confidence you can have. The less they match up, the less confidence you should have. And as you get closer to the time of where you're planning your trip and you wanna go skiing, you can switch to the global models, probably in the days 3 to 5 time frame, depending on how well things are lining up. And you have quite a few more options. So you have the ECMWF, again, that's the European model, the GFS, the CMC, which is the Canadian, the NavGem, which is the Navy, so kind of another American. I don't know the icon, and the GMA might be the Japanese Meteorological Association, but I would have to double check that acronym. We do have a lot of acronyms in the weather industry, so and this is what we call a deterministic model. So it's one version of it. It has a little more detail, and you're going to have some more fields to look at. Um, so you can see there's more snowfall information. There's a little more information in some of the upper and lower dynamics, as well as the ability to zoom in on regions more. So as you get closer in time, you get more detail, which kind of makes sense. And as you get even more closer in time to the time you want to go skiing and you want to go out, you have some other options called mesoscale or high resolution models. And the difference between these and your global and ensembles is the grid spacing that they're looking at the data points gets narrower and narrower and narrower as you go into the high res models, the mesoscale models. And that's kind of what the NAM is showing here with the 32. So that's a bigger grid spacing. 12 is a little smaller, 3 kilometers smaller yet. And so you're able to resolve things like mountain ranges, maybe not an exact peak themselves, but a mountain range is still better than what the global model, the deterministic or the ensemble is going to do, which is just going to show like it'd be like putting just a big brick there, a block really is all it is. So it's
So
not
it's like,
giving you detail.
So it's like it's like a photograph, like taking a big photograph of the whole country. That might be more accurate to show like a bigger trend, but the smaller sort of like you know macro shot of just the Northeast in a closer time scale using something like the NAM, which is only available a few days out, is going to be way more higher resolution, way more accurate. So, like in this case, we'll be able to determine what the rain snow line is here. And it's
Yeah.
actually, it works out in the timing of this because there's supposed to be a snow event, rain snow event, Tuesday into Wednesday for, the Northeast. So we're all getting excited about it. So we can sort of see here, as you had mentioned earlier with the NAM, that, we'll be able to see what that rain snow line is.
Right. And so in this case, we're still looking at those 850 hectopascal height winds. You could just as easily pull up a snowfall. And so there's your snowfall ending at the time frame. It's in Zulu time. Um,
I know, I know, I
yeah, I
don't.
don't know how to explain that one. It's not local time, folks. It's
I
something
know.
else.
Yeah, I don't know what our Zulu time is, but I think we're
Yeah,
-6, but I'm not sure.
yeah, there's tables that you can look up. Basically, they coordinate everything to a town in England, so that way all the model runs occur at the same time, even though we're
yeah,
running them around the globe.
yeah, yeah.
And so again, like we're looking at these high res mesoscale models individually, and we want to look at them as an ensemble. And so to do that, you can go to a tool called the HREF, the High Resolution Ensemble Forecast. It's put out by NOAA and the National Weather Service. It can be found at spc.noaa.gov slash exper/HREF.
And we'll link. I'll put this all like wherever I post this in the description.
Oh,
So
okay.
don't necessarily worry about putting the links out there.
Okay.
If we do have new links, Miles, that we're going to, put them on that Google Doc. I think you should have
Okay.
editing access. Um,
All
I
right.
can
I'll
double
make sure
check
I.
that.
Yeah, I'll plop them in after.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so just to give some background, like these are the members, as we call models that go into an ensemble that I'm scrolling through here. And you can see like there are some
the NAM
differences
nest.
between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the NAM Nest is that 3 kilometer one that we saw on Tropical Tidbits. NAM Nest is like its more common name within the weather industry.
Okay.
And then these -12s are what we call a time lag. So it's the previous run and the current run, and we use them to make an ensemble because you once you get past like the most recent 2, maybe 3 runs, the data starts to become old and less relevant. Like the new runs are going to have a better chance of being correct than the old ones, long term averaged.
Okay.
And
Cool.
so, like Nick mentioned, if you want to look at like the rain snow line, you can go to winter, and there's a precip type indicator. In this case, it indicates everything by colors. Oops. I'm so defaulted to going to my area. I went to northwest
Yeah.
instead of
Yep.
northeast.
Yep.
And so, like, you can see the colors are changing. You have different precip types as you go forward in time, and it's a really useful tool. It only goes out 48 hours, so it's not going to help you plan like a trip super far in advance, but a couple days before for a go no go decision, it's going to be a very powerful resource for you.
Yeah, and like we had talked before, I was planning on doing like Acadia this winter, but it's hard to say, whether or not like a nor'easter is gonna be rain in Maine and then snow in, I don't know, the Adirondacks. So this will be hopefully a relatively accurate tool to kind of show that. So
Yeah, and that's all I have as far as tools go. Um, that are good for an introductory level. Like at that point, you need to just start looking at the models, kind of just the resources are all there. We make all of it available. It's open source science. In fact, the GFS, I believe they just made the code available. You can run it on your laptop if you really want to. So it's fun stuff to get into.
yeah, definitely. Cool. So I guess to like sum it up at a low level, the and correct me if I'm wrong. Let me go ahead and pull out my notes here because we had talked pretty extensively beforehand, but on a I guess overall, no singular model is going to be accurate. The further you're going out with a model, the less accurate you're going to be. The closer you're going to get more accurate, obviously, just because of the butterfly effect, basically, where one error compounds and turns into a completely inaccurate forecast. But if you see overlap in models, that's a really good sign that that the equations are right, the input is right, and then that what's being called for is actually going to happen. So
Yeah.
So
You
would you
nailed
say
it
that's
right on the head. And if you don't
okay?
wanna do that, you can reference our forecast. We do that for you. There again, you now have the tools to do that yourself if you want to.
okay, cool. And so something like an ensemble would be good for like 3 to 6 days out. Looking at the ensembles, then like the GFS for example is better for shorter range, like 3 to 4 days, and then looking at like the NAM 3 kilometer or the NAM Nest, for example, would be best for within like 48 hours or however long they put it out for. And then using the uh, the HREF, which you had mentioned through the weather service, that's a good. There's a lot of information we didn't really get into it, but like using like that for example, might be like that tool we had mentioned might be a good way to determine what the rain snow line is.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so you've pretty much got it, like, y the only thing that I would say is to make sure, when we're talking ensembles, we have them in the near term and the long term, so you wanna use those all the way through.
okay,
Where you wanna use a singular deterministic model, as we call it, is if you want more detail, like, the long range, say at day 5, you're using an ensemble, it doesn't necessarily show you the snow detail, right? It doesn't have a field for that, but it can show you a low pressure, it can give you an idea of the winds, and that might be enough to just go no go right there. But let's say you need a little more detail, like you're unsure, you can go to a singular model, pull it up, and that'll start to give you the snow information or some more detailed wind information. And you want to start referencing that when there starts to be a good agreement in the ensembles.
okay,
Gotcha. Okay. So that's where you're gonna get like your snowfall totals, your wind speeds, which are the most relevant to a skier. Okay, cool. Cool. So yeah, so we have tropical tidbits, which is the resource I use. The the weather.cod.edu, that is another resource as well that you like to use. But those are all going to pull all those models for us. And then obviously what we had discussed about when they're relevant and what you should be using. So was there any like sort of like models that we should be going over? I mean, we had mentioned as well too, looking at like the weather.gov puts out their own uh, products that summarize the impacts of the event. So basically, instead of us looking at, okay, where's the rain snow line gonna be, and then okay, maybe I'm in like Albany, so the rain snow line, it's actually gonna be rain here, or it's actually gonna be ice. Instead, you could look at the weather services page they put out, and that's gonna show you, okay, here's an area where there's gonna be a lot of wind, like a lot of ice or blowing snow. So, was there anything else other than those resources that you would suggest looking at?
Yeah, there's the one that you said you read all the time, which is our forecast discussion. And so basically, every office is going to put this out at least twice a day, sometimes four times a day, depending on how active the weather is. And it's a forecaster like me putting my thoughts in words, and kind of describing like why we are calling for certain things in the forecast, why we're leaving things out, and then some of the details that can't be put into a forecast. And a lot of times, like forecasting a rain snow line, it's details about that transition times, locations where it might get hung up, details leading up to it, behind it, and impacts.
Cool. So let's pull up Burlington's because I like to read those. I would say this too. In my experience, like learning backcountry skiing, when I first started, like I obviously wanted to look at weather resources, but then I ended up kind of struggling because it was hard to find like a good product that like wasn't just numerical and it was like you turn on the weather channel, it's kind of nice to listen to them talk, but to be fair, I don't really want to like listen to what the weather channel has to say like on my TV. I'd rather just have something that is not like a commercial. I don't know, maybe I'm biased. I just feel like the weather, like the National Weather Service forecasters, I personally like the text product. So if you're someone who likes to watch it on TV, like by all means go for it. I think that's like a in there the professionals can look at the information and summarize it in a practical term for us laymen. So I guess this is just like me long-windedly saying I really like the forecast discussions. I don't know if I'm biased, but I think they're a really good resource for those things that aren't quantifiable.
Yeah, no, I like them too. And like the weather service does like even though our information is open to the public, we are working with l- uh, county, state, and federal entities. So like school boards or departments of transportation and entities like that. That's who our main customers are and who we're targeting for. But again, the information is open to everyone, and we're not it's all the same message. And as Nick was saying, like you can find that in the forecast discussion. Everyone's going to have it linked to the bottom of their page called Forecasters Discussion. And it's a text product. It's us writing our thoughts of what we have just looked at for hours, just twiddled with in the forecast to make sure it's just right for you, and putting it into words. And
Let
so
me
this is what it looks like. Like it's
Yeah, and so I would say like this, as someone who like has some mat education, I'm not 100% sure like um if this would make sense to like the layman, but if you're someone who's watching this video and looking for like further resources, I think this is a great start, right? Like if you're looking at models in the first place, you probably understand what high pressure and low pressure is. And so this is going to be a good like summary of that. And like in this case, like if we read this, like we have a system coming in Tuesday night, Wednesday, and this is probably going to be one of our first snowstorms. And if you read here, obviously you could look at just like the numbers and you get this information, but this is basically the forecaster coming on and saying what's going on. So we can see here that he writes the first winter storm of the season is expected to bring 2 to 7 inches of snow to the air Tuesday night into Wednesday. The potential for some wintry mix also can't be ruled out, especially over southern Vermont. Snowfall will come to an end through the day Wednesday, followed by some occasional snow showers through the weekend as a lake effect snow band waffles east of Lake Ontario. So and you can get in here too, like further out. Like I've definitely seen, like for example, like last week I was reading these, and you could see that they were basically referencing how there would be cold air coming in after the weekend. So this is like more of a like just a people put their personal touch and their personal thoughts out, and that's where it's like if you want to start looking at the models and like paying attention to that sort of stuff, like coming back here and looking at what they're saying is going to confirm whether or not what you're looking at and determining is accurate, or if what you're looking at is kind of off the mark.
Yeah, it can be a good check to like make sure your interpretation matches an expert's opinion. And like Nick, I don't know if you remember, they use the term called the trowel. Do you remember what that is?
Uh, I don't.
Uh,
I don't know.
See, that's fine though, because like we're gonna use terms like that. So the trowel is a trough of warm air aloft. I'm sure if
Gotcha.
Rashad ever sees this, he'll come back and send you a textbook for Christmas.
Yeah.
But like you'll learn terms that will help you learn the weather by reading it. So it's sort of an education thing at the same time.
Cool.
I think that's pretty much it for looking forward. The other things I wanted to ask you about too were things like Mountain Forecast, and then another one which is US AirNet. Mountain Forecast puts out like a specific forecast for specific points, like Whiteface Mountain, for example. So, was there like, I mean, what do you think of like? I guess like you don't really earlier you said you don't really know anything about that one in particular, so we probably shouldn't really touch on that. I guess.
I'll say this, if you want to contact them and find out if they are degreed meteorologists, that's great. Like their forecasts are useful. Just be weary that because weather data is open source to everyone, like anyone can post it too and put their own interpretation on there. So you do need to be a little careful with what you're looking at and what you're referencing.
Okay, cool. And it was a text product that the Weather Service puts out with regards to like avalanches and stuff. And it said like Mount Baker, it had
Oh yeah.
what was that product as well?
That is the avalanche guidance.
Okay. Do we maybe want to pull that up for just to kind of navigate to it so we have a like record of that? Because it had like Mount Shasta or
Whatever
So
the
I
case.
did do that earlier and I'm happy to do it again.
Okay.
Uh,
Did you do that? I don't really remember that.
yeah, I did it at the start of our video, but I could do it for a different office if you want.
oh yeah, yeah. Let's do Oregon because I remember there was something that actually came up. Like it gave like you know it gave like Mount Shasta ski bowl or whatever if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, so I'll do this. So we're at my office's portion of the web page. I'm out of Medford, Oregon. It's Jackson County, Southwest Oregon, and we put ours like right on our front page in one of the little squares here, the avalanche guidance. Other offices that don't do that, you're gonna find it under the forecasts tab. Somewhere in here, in our case, it's also under winter. So we put it front and center a little more because it is harder to find. Or maybe it's under winter severe. Nope. Need to go through and rename some things.
Yeah.
But so like as you were saying, if we just click on it on our front page where it's easily linked, like you can find it. And so our points of interest are like Mount Shasta Ski Bowl, which is the old ski bowl, and then it gives the height and elevation, Bunny Flat, and you'll notice all of these are on Mount Shasta. That's our main avalanche concern in our area, or at least that's what the Avalanche Center forecasts for. There are other back skiing points of interest, but we have to kind of stay contained with what the Avalanche Center does too.
Yeah,
You
for
can
sure.
see we switch around elevations, and a good portion of these have observation equipment on there. So you can compare what the forecast is and also see what like current observations are. And a lot of times when a place has an observation station, we also collect climate records or at least a record database. And if you want to reference that, each weather service office has a climate and past weather tab. And then you just go to the local drop down and it's going to pop up this now data option. And so if you are familiar with the local site, you can select something by name or you just click it by map, show some more stations. And you can see there's a bunch of observation points. Some of them are going to have maybe a year's worth of data. Some might have 100 years worth of data. So you have to click around. But if we're interested in Mount Shasta, you can see some of the stations on there don't actually record it. Um,
But we can go somewhere close, right? Like somewhere close by.
And
yeah,
kind of
so we
get it.
can go into the mountains kind of just across the interstate. So that's I-5 there that I'm mousing over.
Okay.
And just to the west in the mountains here, let's take a look at this Collins Baldy. So that's a
Okay.
RAWS, a remote observation weather station.
Mhm.
We can select each of the products shows something different. So I'm monthly summarized data, um, max temperature, and apparently it doesn't have.
Does this one have daily data for a month? Because that might be relevant for someone trying to analyze the snowpack and what's been happening the previous month. Like, for example, if there was a huge dump and then like no snow and a lot of cold weather and then a huge snow event, that's not really a good sign. Does this particular station have that we could see?
It doesn't available through here. So normally you'd be able to click the go button and it would pop up with something. And I'll show you real quick what that looks like on a station I know has it.
Yep.
Although actually that one isn't working either. So I'm not sure. Something's up with the page actually, because these are stations that I QC the data for, and it should be able to view the data by clicking the go button. So some sites have different names. And like if you move the observation station, you need to what's called thread the data to make sure it stays consistent. And so all the ones, at least in our area, that we named area at the end are the threaded data. The one that's just Mount Shasta, probably like the data got bunked. Um,
Okay.
and so what we're looking at here is the daily data for a month. In this case, what did I do? October. So you can see all the data for October is housed here.
Wow, does that seem right? 88?
Yeah, it was. We didn't have like it was just constant high pressure to start October. It was record setting, a lot of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, wow. So I guess like from my limited experience with Avalanche education, this is something that you might want to use if you haven't been to an area in a long time, right? Like I'm flying up to see Miles. We're gonna go backcountry skiing, and I want to go ahead and look at what's been going on in the area because I don't pay attention to Mount Shasta weather on a regular basis like I do where I live. So I think this would be a good start for kind of like figuring out what's been going on in the area recently. Has there been a big snowstorm and then a lot of cold weather, or has there been was there a freezing rain event in there at some point and then maybe questionable weather? So
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I'll pull up Crater Lakes because that's a little more representative, right? Than maybe like a valley location out here.
Uh-huh.
And in the case of Crater Lake, they record the snowfall information. So as you were saying, like if you want to know when a big dump last was, you can find that. In this case, it was November 7th. They picked up 13 inches. Uh,
Wow.
and by the next day, they had 23 inches of virtually fresh powder, considering they had one to start the month. So,
wow. And so was that event from the fifth precipitation 1.68 inches? Because it says no new snow, that was just a strictly rain event.
yeah, so this was the first atmospheric river we had of the year. And there was it got squished between a warm front and a cold front. And the first kind of wave of the AR was the warm front pushing north as the rain came through. So yeah, it was a total rain event. Other than you can see just a little bit. Um, well, actually, yeah, zero. In fact, it wiped out some of this new snow.
Cool. So yeah, so I think that's a good resource for looking backwards. I did notice there was like a local 3 day history, which that might be relevant as well too. Getting a little bit more like not necessarily the right term, but more detail, more resolution on what's been happening in the immediate near term.
Yeah, so in our office's case, we have it labeled observations and hazards.
Okay.
And again, it's a interactive map with all the points on there. Let's see, you can change. So these are your different sources. So I went to observations and provider. Right now, it's the NWS and RAWS being a Forest Service product. And if we wanted to go look at, I think this one will have the Mount Shasta sites on there. And we kind of zoom in, we do a higher resolution. So yeah, we can get the ski bowl and you can see 7,600 feet. It's halfway up Mount Shasta. And like our local avalanche center has these obs linked as well. So you can find them on there. But as you were saying, there's a 3 day history and 5 day history where you can see what's happened recently, temperature wise, um, liquid precip, and snowfall, and the 7 day too.
Yeah, let's see what that's all about. Cause I haven't found anything like that on the east, but I guess it does kind of vary by like what office you're working out of. So
Yeah, but like if you wanted to set a link for this, kind of just on your preferred web browser, it loads stuff. And let me turn some things off since we're zoomed so far out. It links everything throughout the entire CONUS.
Okay.
And if for whatever reason you don't want to use a weather service product, like the data can also be found from the University of Utah's Meso West page. And that's the same deal. You can get it as a list or again as sort of a map of obs.
Do they have anything in Vermont? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so they have stuff for like every WFO, every state. So let's see if I remember my alphabet here. There it is, Vermont, Burlington. Yep. And then we'll zoom over. So like, yeah, so that's Burlington, Vermont's forecast area. And these are the points within there that they have access to and keep track of.
cool. So to the right of or to the east of Burlington, that 32,
Mhm.
Morristown.
Right here.
That's gonna be pretty close to like where Smugglers is, if I remember correctly. Do they have like a 3 day here or a 7 day?
So I clicked on the station itself,
uh,
and then I hit the additional tabular and graphical displays.
okay.
So that's where I got the new window from, and that's going to be the best history you can get.
Okay, and you'll be able to find this presumably for this station as well, but from the weather service at the page that we had just pulled from for the Mount Shasta area.
And it'll be the same data too. Like,
Okay.
it won't be different different stuff.
Okay, cool, cool. All right, so that's helpful for like near term, and then we covered the past term as well. A couple other things I wanted to throw in there too. Miles, if you want to pull up under the Google Doc that I had, the Whiteface Summit data and the Mesonet data. I mean, this is local for me in particular, but one of the guys out of Albany had linked me this, which is just a 7 day time series for Whiteface. I don't know if like they have this on the page that we had just looked at, but I guess like sort of figuring out where there's weather stations locally and maybe reaching out to the people who administer those, they might be able to help you with that. Because I wasn't able to find this other than reaching out to them directly.
For sure, yeah. Part of why some weather stations don't show up like on our stuff is that we want it coming in like in constant update cycles. So if that's not able to be provided, where maybe they're only updating it like 6 hourly, it might not be in our database at the time. But
Okay.
yeah, it's usually still open source.
Yeah. And then another item too, I'm just covering these because these are things that I've found, was like the Mesonet. Yeah. And so you can kind of click on here and get uh, like I guess like I believe this is like current or like observed data as well, and then there's photographs as well too. If you hover over, if you go down, and then if you hover over right there, yeah, you could see right where you just were.
Yeah.
You could see like photographs.
Yeah, go from no snow to snow.
Yep. So that's helpful if you don't live in like the area. You can kind of see what's going on. And then there's another one too out of Mount Washington. You could see they have an F6 chart. And so this is just, and you could pull, like if you go to 2022 January, all the way on the left, you can see like, the temperature from, and this was obviously, 10 months ago now, but this is basically the same thing that we were kind of accessing, with the 30-day history, but this is for Mount Washington specifically, which I don't know if like the Weather Service you can be able to find this data specifically, but this is helpful for you to look at like what sort of events have been happening on Mount Washington specifically.
Yeah, so you can find a lot of this. Like for us, it's under the same climate local drop down. Um, doo. Yeah, so we have a CF6 for there, and again, it's the same deal. Like it records the same data. It's going to be for what we call the climate station. So in this case, you can see our stations here. So not every place that has an observation station is also going to have like monthly summarized reports, but some of them can. And in this case, like having the Mount Washington is super useful.
Yeah, because like I don't think that would be like available on the Weather Service website. I haven't looked because I haven't been.
I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't been like super. Like I haven't really used a ton of the Weather Service's website because it's not necessarily the easiest to navigate. But that's obviously
Yeah.
hopefully what the goal of today is to kind of like, show where those specific items are for us skiers.
Yeah. And it's the it's funny you bring up the Navita how easy it is to use the website because it is being like looked at and they're figuring out how to um, like revamp it and make it more user friendly, both content wise and like user interface wise.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I mean, it's used by like the entire country, so it's like it's. I imagine it's not very easy to put all the information on there in a concise way. I totally understand why it's that way. It just this is hopefully for skiers this is like a focused review of that information. So yeah, so we went over the models, we went over like the past history, we went over forecast discussions. So I guess like the big deal is with this sort of stuff like this is just gonna give you a picture, but unless you're like high level and highly trained in avalanche, like hazards and risks and everything, unless you're level 2, then you really shouldn't be making your own go no go decisions based off of just this. You should be looking at the local avalanche center's forecast. So I was gonna ask you what you would do if there was no avalanche forecast, but I really think that that's kind of answered by what I just said, which is probably really shouldn't be going unless there is one.
yeah, this information does not replace an avalanche center's avalanche risk forecast. It also doesn't necessarily indicate your own risk. You have to assess that for yourself. We can only help provide you information to make that decision.
Yep.
So yeah, and then I would say like in terms of I guess like as a weather guy, like we understand like one thing we talked about in avalanche education was like spatial variability. So they may call for 10 inches at Shasta, but that doesn't mean that you know that Adams or whatever is close by is going to have that as well. Bachelor is going to have that as well. So is that something that can come up like in the models? Is that something that you would see a difference in like on the NAM? I mean, do you have anything to say about that as well? Like as a forecaster, how true is that? Like how aware of that are you when you decide, should I ski here or should I ski there?
Oh, super aware. I mean, forecasts can bust. Models themselves are just a prediction for the future. That's why we encourage the ensemble. That's why you want to look at it from a probability standpoint. What is the chance that something happens? Um, and yeah, you gotta assess it based on your own risk and tolerances, and experience level too. As you said, like if you don't have the courses, don't rely just on this. You gotta take the courses and gain the knowledge yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so I guess I think we went through a lot of the information. I really can't think of anything else that we didn't really cover. I would say the final thing I want to do is maybe if you could like prescribe like a routine maybe for someone not named Nick to look at on a regular basis, before maybe making a decision. Like where would you start? And keep in mind, and maybe not me in particular because I understand weather. I'd say I'm probably like intermediate, right? Like, let's say we want to look at a storm like three a week out, and then what would you look at 3 days out, and then what would you look at like the day of?
Or like,
Everything. Like you know, do what I do in the office. Look at everything.
yeah, yeah,
But no, no, like so I would encourage you to, if nothing else, reference the National Weather Service's forecast. There again, we look at all of this and synthesize it all down for you. If not that, you're looking at the global ensembles, so the EPS or the GEFs first. And then as you get closer in time, you're looking at the HREF. And you can substitute that with some model data, singular models, be it the GFS, ECMWF, NamNest, HER, to name a few. Supplement, get a little more specific detail in there. And then you want to translate that information into a finished product. So you want to look at the impacts. The Winter Storm Severity Index tool is great for that. And as you said, like from a skiing, backcountry skiing standpoint, look at the previous history and apply your knowledge from Avalanche courses and the Avalanche Center's products also, and put that all together.
Nice. So yeah, so really kind of starting with looking at like, well, obviously always a discussion is a good resource. Looking at the ensembles, and then kind of comparing the discussion with what you saw in the ensembles, which are the longer term things. And on that, we're going to be looking for large scale systems like low pressure, stuff like that. Low pressure creates weather. Well, the weather that we are interested in is skiers. And then from there, if you want to track in like a system that might dump some new snow, you would move into that like the ensembles. And then you might move to a deterministic model. Cool. So that's really good to know because that's kind of like what I didn't know coming into this conversation tonight. So I'm really glad that you were able to provide that information for me. Um, yeah, I think we covered it all. Really, I mean, we covered a lot. So
Yeah, and I'm happy to do this. Like you know, being a weather person yourself, like it's fun to chat with someone with the background about this sort of stuff
yeah,
and
definitely.
review some of the more niche things.
I hope that this video sort of like helps guide people to where the information is. Because when I first started, it was so hard to like figure out like, okay, where do I go for this information? Where do I go for that information? And I think I'm gonna add in like a section here at like off camera as well, looking at like another resource as well, which is CalTopo, which is gonna show you like slope angle. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No, I haven't, but
I can send that to you too, but it's actually really helpful, and it tells you like slope angle, and can tell you, and that's in like slope direction stuff like that too. So that can help you, and it shows you winds, so you can look at like sort of like wind, like where wind loading might occur. So that's a good resource as well. But yeah, I like I said, it's a lot of information, but for people who want to dig deep, I think this is hopefully will be a good guide for that.
And this is just the weather side of things. You almost need another chat with an employee at an avalanche center because when you ask like how do you take these things and put them together, like they also do that too. Like the Mount Shasta Avalanche Center. When you read their forecast, they reference a little bit of our forecast. They reference a little bit of model data. Like they are doing exactly what you're trying to do here by putting it all together.
Yeah, and like as someone who's gonna progress from like a avalanche, like aware of avalanches to level 1 to level 2, once you get to like level 2, or you maybe want to take the guiding route, or you know do like the pro level 1, and I believe
Yeah.
there's a pro level 2 as well. You know, you're gonna want to have your own routine for weather and like the information you look at, because you look at something different than what your other colleagues look at. So all of this information is scattered, and then I'm sure you take certain things with more stock than others. So
Yeah, for sure. Like you ask Brian who's sitting behind me, I'm sure he'd give you a totally different answer of the forecast process and like it's yeah, 10 different meteorologists, 10 different solutions because you go through the data 10 different ways.
yeah, because
But
ultimately it's predicting the future, which nobody has a crystal ball.
yeah,
So
no.
so there's really kind of different ways to go about determining what you're gonna put stock in. So
Yeah, and let me know if you ever take those pro avalanche courses. You can come be my guide out west here.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would go that route. Although I have been thinking about it lately. I'm like, maybe that's something that wouldn't be such a bad idea. It's like doing like guiding, because it's like if I'm out there enough and I learn enough, like it would be cool. But that's a whole nother business, and so
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that.
for
But
sure.
I was gonna mention to you too. When I was in the Avalanche course, like there was guys. I know someone had mentioned like there's guys who will pay for a custom forecast, which is something that I think you should. I'll keep you in mind for obviously, but there's like I know like if you're going like deep in like Alaska where they don't have a lot of weather stations or anything like that, someone like you might get paid to like do a custom forecast for an area.
Oh yeah.
There's companies, there's one out of Salt Lake, Utah, that like that's what they do. They do backcountry forecasts,
Yeah,
skiing in the winter, and I would assume maybe like hunting trips during the fall and hiking, backpacking during the summer. Like,
Like
Yeah, that's sick. That's
yeah.
awesome. So, I don't know if that's something that you would ever want to like pursue or make custom forecasts for, but
ooh, like make custom forecasts for, yes, but like
as a
ah,
business, yeah,
this
it's a
job is
different story.
very this job pays pretty okay and is super stable. So like it's tough. I'd have to know
Yeah,
more.
yeah, for sure, for sure. We'll keep that in mind though, because definitely when I heard that, I definitely thought of you. So,
It's big in Italy, but like and California, but like working with vineyards and like the winemaking industry for like forecasts for that,
yeah, that's
like
cool.
that's a pretty big deal. Like I could just go out there on a villa, put together a forecast a couple times a week and drink some wine there.
yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So, yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I mean, looking through all the resources I've got here, um, yeah, I mean that's pretty much everything. I think I'd say the last like 5 minutes were probably the most like normal part, like the most like we kind of gave a good overview there. So
Yeah.
I think I'm
And
happy with everything.
All right, cool. And I'll make sure all the links that I shared are in your doc as well.
Okay.
None of this is supplemental to actual avalanche education. I'm sure none of this represents like the weather service itself. This is all just like your opinion and whatnot. So
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know if you want to give
actually,
your own disclaimer.
well, yeah, first of all, like take the avalanche courses. You need to, and weather is only a singular part of it. But no, this forecast process that I'm talking about, with like the ensembles, long range, short range, deterministic, like that is actually like weather service. I thought about pulling up the fancy like documents for it, but I was like, nah.
Yeah, too high level.
Yeah. But like it has that flow chart, and the College of DuPage kind of has it too, like where they start ensembles, medium, long range, deterministic.
I did notice that. Yeah, I noticed that.
Which is
Yeah.
nice.
So like that's kind of the flow thinking. And then like all the resources I shared from the Weather Service page, like that's stuff they're pushing, you know, to have you use and do. And so
Yeah. Awesome. All right, dude. Well, I think my camera's on 28%. So.
All right. I won't hold you up for too much longer then.
Yeah, dude. I appreciate your time a lot.
All right. Take care, Nick.
Yeah, enjoy your night.